And you only get from somebody scratching your neck. And why would somebody be scratching your neck to the point of causing a couple of dozen, maybe more parallel scars? You get strangled to death. That's why. The other physical feature that couldn't be missed was the size of this guy's hands. If there was ever a natural born strangler, it was Samuel Little. His fingers were abnormally long and strong looking. His demeanor was unlike other violent people I've seen in the courtroom. He was humble, he was stooped, he spoke quietly and firmly. There was one point only that I could get a rise out of. Talking about him strangling Tanya. He grew indignant. He didn't get what he paid for his $20 worth. And he felt that he was cheated. And he said in a loud tone, she was trying to cheat me, and then she attacked me, and I had to put my hands around her neck to get her off me.
Between his weakened prosecution and the defense's strong showing, Rempel knows his case now hinges on his closing argument.
I characterized him as more than a would-be murderer. He was a torture murderer. The case went out to the jury. The jury didn't take a long time, and they came back hung 9-3 for acquittal. I was incredulous.
As a last resort, Rempel offers up a plea deal he hopes will keep Little off the street as long as possible.
If he would plead guilty to 2 assaults with intent to commit great bodily injury and go to prison on those charges, we'd have to dismiss the other charges against him.
Little takes the deal and gets a 4-year prison sentence.
At the sentencing hearing, I was red-faced and basically shouting, he gets out again and he will get out. He will continue killing.
After serving just 30 months in prison, Samuel Little walks free in February 1987.
I didn't know where he was going to turn up. He probably wasn't going to try to kill again in San Diego, but I knew he'd go somewhere and do it again.
Soon after his release from prison, the bodies of strangled women start turning up in Los Angeles. And more than 2 decades later, that DNA taken in San Diego will come back to haunt Samuel Little. In November 2012, detectives in LA are desperately uncovering Samuel Little's murderous past and hit pay dirt.
As they were building the case, they got a 3rd hit on DNA, and that was Carol Alford.
41-year-old Carol Alford is found strangled in July 1987, just 5 months after Little gets out of prison in San Diego. DNA from her shirt is matched to the suspect, just as it is with the 2 victims already linked to Little, Audrey Nelson and Guadalupe Apodaca.
His DNA was on all 3 of the victims. They all died the same way. The manner of death was the same.
All 3 LA victims are also found strangled within the vicinity of Little's apartment at the time. The DA can now try him for multiple murders.
There's no charge per se for serial murder, but they can charge multiple murders, and then that's what's called a special circumstance, and allows them to seek the death penalty.
In addition to the DNA evidence linking Little to the 3 murders, the prosecution establishes a pattern of similar crimes outside of LA.
he had a few survivors. And it documented these really brutal assaults and kind of remarkable instances where these women survived. There were 2 in San Diego, and they found these cases in Mississippi where these 2 prostitutes who had been severely beaten. With those witnesses, I think they had a really strong case. Between that and the DNA, and just sort of being able to show that pattern, seeing how the bodies were dumped the same way, and that, you know, some of these other survivors had similar scenarios.
On September 2nd, 2014, after 2 weeks of testimony, 74-year-old Samuel Little is found guilty of the murders of Carol Alford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson. It's an emotional time for the families of the murdered women.
That must have been the worst part, not knowing, you know, who did it.
I've had a gaping hole in my heart for 25 years. It's a very difficult time, but I'm glad it's over.
After a lifetime of skirting justice, he's sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms.
Claimed there was some evidence that they had suppressed or something that was going to, you know, clear him eventually.
His conviction was drawn by lies, and liars caused by liars.
When they wheeled him out of court after he was convicted, he had his hand up in the air in defiance and maintained his innocence throughout.
As Little files appeal after appeal, FBI crime analyst Christy Palazzolo never loses sight of him. She remains convinced that he's responsible for Denise Brothers' 1994 murder in Odessa, Texas.
It was always on my mind as one of the particularly compelling leads that I had sent out, and so I was always hoping that someday we'd be able to do more with it.
In 2018, she gets her chance. Her colleague Angela Williamson gets a call from Texas Ranger Jim Holland, asking about Samuel Little.
I literally leaned back and said, "Christy, have you ever heard of this guy?"
Knowing she was on the phone with Jim, I called back and I say, "Yeah, ask him about the Denise Brothers homicide. It's in Odessa, it's Texas, that's his territory." There would have to be some sort of nexus back to Texas for the Rangers to be involved. They are a very specialized unit and they have a lot of skills, but they can't just run around the country doing interviews on behalf of other agencies. There has to be some connection back to Texas for them to go.
The Odessa connection to Holland is just the link the crime analyst needs. The team of 3, Palazzolo, Williamson, and Holland, now have a joint mission to get Little's confession for the murder of Denise Brothers, and possibly many more.
The victims, their voice was stolen, so they need somebody else to be their voice.
That's kind of how it got started, the stars aligning and everyone kind of coming together. That's where we can trace the origin back to this whole investigation into Samuel Little.
Their plan: confront Little in person. Holland, an expert in interviewing psychopaths, will face off with the killer.
This time we had somebody who would be able to follow up directly with Little and confront him on this particular case. And we'll know these cases and be able to help guide Jim with his questions to help corroborate anything that he might say.
The way Jim works is a lot of respect and a lot of letting Little tell his narrative. I always just thought it was going to work.
4 years after the Ellie murder trial, the timing is right.
Little, he had 9 lives. He got off charges, he got acquitted on things. He thought he was going to fight and win an appeal on the latest conviction. So he wasn't talking to anyone. But when we all came together, those appeals had been exhausted.
He knew, and we knew, that he was going to be in jail for the rest of his life. There was no more reason not to talk about it.
The question is, will he?
Then the plan gets started. To arm yourself with as much information is critical when you go in for one of these interviews. So that's what we spent the next couple of months doing, is just as complete a picture as possible.
It's a deeper dive than Palazzolo's first go-around in 2013.
Now we're trying to learn more about Little as a person and who he was, so that Major Holland could hopefully talk to him.
LAPD provided us a lot of documentation, which Christy and I spent a lot of time going through, so we did give Jim pieces of information that would be useful for the interview. You know, things like Little liked to box, and he liked to draw, and he liked to paint. He'd done a mural in prison beforehand. Insight into his life.
Samuel Little is born in 1940 and grows up in Lorain, Ohio. Little is his mother's last name. Sometimes he also uses his dad's family name, McDowell.
Here's somebody who was born to a very young mom who was unable to take care of him. From a very early age, he begins to have problems at school. And as early as age 13, is starting to get involved in the criminal justice system.
He ended up living with his biological mother for a little while. She died in 1973, and shortly thereafter, that's when he hit the road and never really had a solid address for any length of time after that.
Little soon meets Aurelia Dorsey, who will later testify for him in the San Diego trial.
Aurelia Dorsey was much older woman than him. They met in a prison, I think it was in Ohio. Sam was arrested for armed robbery.
And after he was released, they traveled together for the rest of her life. She would shoplift, and then he would turn around and sell it to people on the street. That's how they made their money.
Aurelia sided with him until the day she died. No, he'd never do this. He would never do that. Sam was a good man. Even though he beat the hell out of her.
He may have been attached to her to the extent that he could be attached to anybody, but a lot of it was just transactional. He's with somebody that's going to help him get his needs met.
The shoplifting brings in enough money for Little to buy a series of cars he uses to crisscross the country in search of his prey. So how does he get away with it for so long? It starts with his MO.
When you have manual strangulation, it's often one of the hardest to identify, especially if there's any kind of time between when the victim was killed and when the body is recovered.
Then there's Little's choice of victims.
A lot of his victims did sex work. Sometimes they were runaways, hitchhikers, just women who were high risk, that were vulnerable.
He really believed, and unfortunately there seems to be some evidence to back him up, that if he targeted these individuals, law enforcement isn't going to be as concerned about them.
Especially in the 1980s and 90s.
With the crack epidemic going on, police officers were stretched as they were having to make these difficult decisions. Plus the fact that he knew the legal system. He'd been involved in the legal system since he was 13 years old.
He followed a real playbook, and it worked time and time again. He moved frequently. He used different names. He traveled with an alibi witness. He left no weapons. He picked victims who wouldn't be missed.
Including, as Palazzolo and Williamson discover, a series of 1982 murders that horrified police across 2 states.
We had a big kill problem, so it's not just that we're looking for a violent individual here. I don't think we ever thought we were going to